It's race week and the big teams have upgrades ready. Oscar identifies a key weakness as he continues to perform well, and Daniel gets blasted for being not good enough anymore. Do consider subscribing to the channel. Now let's get straight into the latest F1 news. Former Renault F1 chief Cyril Abiteboul has empathized with the situation his former colleagues are currently going through as uncertainty at Alpine continues. Cyril Abiteboul's association with Renault stems back over 2 decades, having first joined Renault as a college graduate in 2001, with tenures as business development manager and managing director before splitting with the manufacturer after 2020. The future of Renault in F1 is far from certain as the sport prepares to awaken from its summer slumber. Prior to the summer break, former F1 team boss Bruno Famin confirmed Renault's intention to transform its Viry-Châtillon factory, which has developed and manufactured Formula One engines for 4 decades, into a technological hub for the wider group Renault. The intention is for the Alpine F1 team to part ways with its Renault power unit and change from being a factory team into that of a customer. Mercedes is hotly tipped to be the supplier Alpine will turn to for 2026 and the start of the new regulations. The news, which isn't yet certain as Renault negotiates with unions in France over the move, has been met with dismay by employees at Viry-Châtillon, who have been left distraught by the proposed changes. Former Renault F1 team boss Cyril Abiteboul, who oversaw Renault's participation through his roles as managing director of the manufacturer's motorsport activities, including the Viry facility, as well as leading the F1 team, spoke about the difficult situation unfolding at his former employers. "I feel sorry for the group of people I knew very well," he said, speaking to Motorsport.com's Brazilian subsidiary. Following Famin's departure, the F1 team will be led forward by new team boss Oliver Oakes, with former Benetton and Renault team boss Flavio Briatore brought on board by Group Renault CEO Luca De Meo as executive advisor to serve as an intermediary between Oakes and De Meo. Speaking at the finish round of the World Rally Championship, in which Abiteboul now works as team boss of Hyundai Motorsport, Abiteboul said he would like to think the people at Viry-Châtillon will have the chance to continue working in the area they love. "I worked there for 15 years, that's a long time, and many things have changed. I'd like to think that it's not the end of the story for those who have dedicated their lives to Formula One, but I'm no longer the boss, so it's difficult to comment." 2026 represents a time of huge change in F1, where the regulations are set to be torn up with new chassis and power unit rules coming into effect. On top of that is the arrival of more manufacturers, as Audi takes over the Sauber squad, and Ford partners up with Redbull powertrains. There's also the possibility of General Motors with its Cadillac brand if the Andretti entry is given permission to enter F1. But Abiteboul downplayed the possibility of Hyundai following suit, despite the Korean brand's success in world rallying. "I don't think we're ready for that," he said. "Formula One is a world apart. There's no way we'd come as a sponsor. We're authentic. It's not in our interest to pay other people's bills. It's not our style. But the other option would be to come with our own technology. For now, we're not ready for it. We're not even interested. Maybe in the long term, but in the short term, we're not ready at all. Our only chance of getting in would be in 2031, but we haven't decided on that year yet. It would definitely take 5 years to get ready." Take Audi as an example. They also decided in 2021 to enter in 2026. Mercedes driver George Russell explained that, without the dominance of Max Verstappen, the last 3 seasons could have potentially seen him earn up to 20 victories and pole positions. The British driver remains confident that his time will come in the sport, having most recently taken his second career Grand Prix victory in Austria in July. Verstappen won a whopping 34 of the 44 races to take place in 2022 and 2023, a quite remarkable statistic as he cantered to 2 of his 3 world championships by record margins, setting all-time records for the most victories in a single season in the process. Russell's previous sole victory to date had come at Interlagos in 2022, before taking top spot in Austria after the Dutchman collided with Lando Norris late on, but he then had a third win taken from him at the last round at Spa-Francorchamps following a disqualification for an underweight car. With 3 career pole positions to his name, Russell explained how this current time in Formula One is Max's era, but he is going to bide his time and will be ready when the opportunity comes. "If these last 3 years was a different era, I potentially can have 20 wins, poles to my name and fighting for championships in all of these years," Russell told The Times. My time will come. When I look at Fernando, Alonso, or Lewis, I think I've got a good 17 to 20 years left in me. We're all going to get our opportunity at some point. This is Max time, Max's era. There's no guarantee that he's going to be fighting every single year in the future. Who knows what's going to come next? I've just got to make sure I'm ready. Given that nothing is a certainty in Formula One, with Russell having started out in a backmarking Williams team prior to his rise to Mercedes in 2022, he explained that his hurdle in junior racing in his teenage years made him realize that there are factors in motorsport beyond his control, which has helped him in the present day. It was only when I was 16 that I recognized life's not quite as simple as what you believed as a kid, and you couldn't just rely on your speed and talent, you had to go above and beyond, he said. I think that was, to be honest, the fact that it was a little bit challenging for me for a year and a half, 2 years, of not knowing my future. It's been very beneficial for me now as a person. While Red Bull's dominance appears to be at an end, Max Verstappen says this only serves as hunger to fuel a harder push. Red Bull headed into the summer break without a win in the last 4 races, the longest winless streak for the Milton Keynes-based squad since 2020. With McLaren and Mercedes coming on song, the dominance of last year's RB19 has become a distant memory. While Verstappen's driving is keeping Red Bull in the fight for the championships, as McLaren's MCL38 now appears to be the most versatile and perhaps the quickest car on the grid in 2024, the situation is in stark contrast to last season and even the early stages of this year. After the first handful of races, Verstappen enjoyed a large lead as the RB20 hit the ground running, but upgrades have brought the likes of Mercedes and McLaren to a level of competitiveness that has even left Red Bull lagging, particularly over race distances. With the team's dominance at an end, the pressure will thus escalate on Verstappen in the second half of the championship as he aims to bring home the title against drivers equipped with apparently faster cars, and the Dutch driver admitted there's not likely to be many easy weekends for the rest of the year. In the beginning, we could really say that it was track-specific, but I think it's clear now that no matter what track we go to, we have a hard time everywhere, he told the Hungarian publication Formula.hu. I would say that we have not been the fastest in the last few races. Yes, it's a bit harder now. The others are doing a good job of improving the performance of the car, but of course we have to point out that we are still leading the constructors' standings. It's not that bad, but we have to try to improve the performance of the car so that we can try to fight back and set the pace again. While leading the championship, the fact success is now starting to elude Red Bull on track has positioned the world champions as the ones aiming to improve further, says Verstappen, who was matter-of-fact about how the fate of the titles is now in the team's hands. The downturn in performance should be as much an incentive as the pursuit of success, he said. Well, you can always say that, but I never like to think that way myself. Because I think when you're the winning team, you have to push even harder, even harder. That should be the mentality, but that's the way it goes. The people who are chasing you have the hunger to win and the desire to try to beat you. And they've been doing a good job of it lately, so it's up to us to respond. But while Verstappen's jaw-dropping dominance of 2023 may have come to an end, there is an upside for the Dutch driver, namely, that he now gets to enjoy wheel-to-wheel racing against his rivals again, rather than sprinting off into the distance. I really enjoyed last year, but I knew we would never have another season like the one we had, he explained. I mean, I thought it was unrealistic to be that competitive again, so I was prepared for it. Of course, I was hoping that we would have a bit more of a lead, but that's the way it is. I've been fighting quite a lot with other drivers on the track lately, but obviously I know who has a personal driving style. It's like that in all sports, isn't it? Not everyone is the same, but that's the way it is. I've grown up with a lot of drivers, and it's fun to battle with people my own age that I know from my go-karting days. Ferrari team principal Fred Vasseur said the team are in permanent discussions with Charles Leclerc, admitting topics arise of when both he and the team have made mistakes this season. These continued talks make up part of the life of a team, according to Vasseur, though Leclerc and the Scuderia have undergone a dip in form after their driver's emotional home victory at the Monaco Grand Prix back in May. Because of this success, Vasseur admitted Leclerc's expectations rose for the season ahead as Ferrari looked to close down the pace of Red Bull and McLaren, but after retiring in Canada and finishing 5th in Spain, he finished outside the points in both Austria and Great Britain. having not finished outside the top 4 places all season prior to Monaco. His form has since ticked back up again with a P4 finish at the Hungarian, and he was promoted to the podium at the Belgian Grand Prix prior to the summer break, following the disqualification of Mercedes' George Russell. But Vasseur assured the team are not in a situation whereby they are looking to finger point for that mid-season drop-off. It's not just about Charles, it's tough for the team, Vasseur told Formula1.com. After Monaco, we had a tough sequence. In Canada, we were not in bad shape. What is clear is the car is a bit more difficult to drive the last couple of events, and the level of expectation of Charles is also a bit higher. It's the life of a team that you have up and downs. We have permanent discussions with Charles. He knows the situation on our side, what we do well and what we did wrong, and he knows sometimes he did some mistakes. But we're not in the situation that we're trying to put the responsibility on someone. We've been working together for years, we know each other perfectly, we know we are pushing, we know we just need to fix things. We are absolutely not in the situation to finger point. It's also where it's good to have a personal relationship. For Leclerc himself, he admitted the initial races saw Ferrari get everything they could out of the SF24, but a move to extreme setups left him unsure how far he could push his car. With Mercedes having appeared to have leapfrogged the Scuderia in the competitive pecking order too, he admitted they are just not fast enough as it stands, with work to be done if they are to improve once the season resumes. First half, really good. I think we couldn't hope for better. We maximized the potential of the car, Leclerc told media, including PlanetF1.com, when asked to sum up the first part of the season from his perspective. Then we've had 4 races where we were going extreme setups, and for me it was just impossible to get to quali and to know where the limit of the car was. We lost a lot of points, and the last 2 races we focused again on maximizing the results, and I think we did. But we're just not fast enough. So that's where we really need to focus and to do a step further for the second half, if we want to have any better results. Former Red Bull driver Daniel Ricciardo should retire from racing and take up a new role as an F1 television pundit and commentator. That is the belief of Dutch analyst Tom Coronel, who has urged Ricciardo to be honest with himself and accept that he has no business being at Red Bull Junior Team VCARB. Having lost his McLaren drive at the end of the 2022 season, Ricciardo returned to a race seat with VCARB, then AlphaTauri, in July 2023 after a short spell as Red Bull's reserve driver. The Australian has largely struggled since his comeback, registering just 4 points finish in 22 races, including 3 in the last 6 prior to F1 summer break. Ricciardo's future came under scrutiny ahead of June's Austrian Grand Prix, as Red Bull advisor Helmut Marko revealed the company's shareholders are keen to see VCARB return to its Toro Rosso roots as a team to train young drivers. The 35-year-old then emerged as a candidate to replace Sergio Perez at Red Bull Racing after the summer break, before team principal Christian Horner confirmed Perez and Ricciardo will remain in place entering the second half of the season. It remains to be seen whether the situation will be revisited as the final 10 races of F1 2024 unfold, with a final decision on Perez and Ricciardo to be decided ahead of 2025. Coronel has given Ricciardo a lowly 4.6 out of 10 rating for his performances so far this season, having been out-qualified by teammate Yuki Tsunoda at 9 of the 14 rounds to date. And he says the time has come for Ricciardo to move into the commentary box, having struggled to recapture his best form since leaving Red Bull for Renault at the end of 2018. He told Formula1.nl. A few years ago, when Daniel Ricciardo left Red Bull and went for the money at Renault, I already knew it. He chose the dough and not his racing heart. It's a nice story. The Ricciardo 2.0 who has learnt from his mistakes, blah blah blah, but he just doesn't get it anymore. He didn't succeed at McLaren, he didn't succeed at AlphaTauri, and he's never going to succeed again. Be honest with yourself. He is an ideal motorsport co-commentator or analyst. He is funny, has flair, and can handle anything well. Go and enjoy that, but stop doing Formula 1. And at a training team, he has no business at all anyway. Formula 1 is the class for the world's top 20 drivers, and he hasn't been part of that for a long time. Coronel's comments come after Ricciardo became embroiled in a war of words with Jacques Villeneuve, the 1997 world champion, during the Canadian Grand Prix weekend in June. In a rare appearance as a Sky F1 pundit in Montreal, Villeneuve claimed that Ricciardo's image has kept in F1 more than his actual results, and claimed the Perth-born driver has been struggling for the last 5 years. Ricardo responded by telling Villeneuve to eat so wags before suggesting the Canadian had hit his head a few times playing ice hockey, with Villeneuve affronted by Ricardo's personal reaction and doubling down on his remarks. Red Bull's roster of junior drivers, including reserve driver Liam Lawson and F2 championship leader Isaac Hadjar, could complicate the team's decision on Ricardo's future. Lawson impressed while standing in for an injured Ricardo across 5 races in mid-2023, but found himself overlooked for a full-time drive for F1 2024. Marco revealed earlier this year that a clause in Lawson's contract will allow the New Zealander, who has attracted interest from Audi, to cut ties with Red Bull entirely if he is not promoted to a permanent seat for next season. PlanetF1.com understands that Red Bull's option on Lawson expires next month, with the decision likely to be communicated within the next few weeks. Hadjar, meanwhile, has emerged as a serious contender for an F1 promotion, having established a 36-point lead in the prestigious F2, formerly GP2, feeder series, previously won by the likes of Nico Rosberg, Lewis Hamilton, Nico Hülkenberg, Charles Leclerc, and George Russell. Marco recently hinted that the French Algerian will have a role within Red Bull's F1 operation in 2025, potentially taking on Lawson's reserve driver duties. Oscar Piastri has suggested tire management was the biggest thing he needed to look at after his rookie season in the sport. His results since his debut make it easy to forget that Piastri is only a year and a half into his F1 career, but when asked by PlanetF1.com if there was an area he still needed to improve in, tire management was his answer. Piastri settled very quickly into life in F1, scoring 97 points and registering a sprint victory, but continues to improve as he gets more experienced. Given the lack of an obvious flaw in his skill set, PlanetF1.com asked if he had identified any area for improvement. "I would say there's been improvements," the Australian said. "Definitely, I think in terms of tire management, going into the season was my biggest thing to look at, and I think on the most part it's been a good improvement. I think Bahrain is traditionally a track very, very tough on tires, and I was very even with Lando in terms of pace. There's been really only China. That was a bit of a step back, I would say, which again, was a circuit I've not driven at, and some things I definitely know I can do better the next time I go back there. So I think there's been some improvements in everything." Piastri also suggested that in the second half of the year, he got into his groove in qualifying, but conceded more work was needed in regards to race day. "I think qualifying in the second half of last year I felt confident in, and this year. I think the biggest gap between me and Lando has been like a 10th the whole season, so I think we're very, very close in that. Still just little things here and there in terms of managing a race. Managing tires, I think, is probably still the biggest area, but I definitely feel like I've made a big step forward from last year." Thanks for watching the video. I'll see you around.